Imperial Japanese Navy super battleship Yamato in 1 to 200 scale. Welcome to Model Kit Stuff. So hello and welcome to Model Kit Stuff, and welcome to part 1 of our 1 to 200 Yamato first impressions. Now I say part 1, I plan to do 3 videos. Now if you'd seen my Scharnhorst first impressions when that came out a little while ago, you know we did 3 videos there, but I'm planning to do this a little bit differently this time. So in this first video, what we'll be doing is having a look at what you get in the box, like I do with any other first impressions. So we'll be having a look at the instructions, we'll be having a look at the plastic parts, we'll be mentioning any obvious issues, and just summarising, is this a good kit? Is it a bit of a dog? What have we got in the box? Is it worth buying into? And giving you guys who might be considering buying it an understanding of what you get for your money. So that will be part 1. Part 2 and part 3 will be for rivet counters. So I'll be working with my friend naval architect Stephen Payne, and we're going to go through the kit with a fine tooth comb and work out all the things we think need to be corrected. So those 2-part videos will come out probably a little bit later than this initial video because it'll take a little bit of time to pull that together. And what we'll do in the second video in part 2 is we'll focus on the hull and the deck, and then in part 3 we'll focus on the superstructure. So at the end of it you'll have 3 videos that takes you through what you get in the kit, any issues with the hull and the deck, and any issues with the superstructure, with a view to be able to create a museum standard ship to the latest information that we have on the Yamato. This is part 1, so let's start with some photographs of the box, the packaging, and how this is going to get delivered to you. So let's take a look at the instruction book and get a feel for how it's intended to put this kit together. Now the first thing to say is the manual is a very nicely bound manual. We've got a glossy front and back, and it's a landscape A4 format, so it's got a nice quality feel about it. The artwork from the front of the box carries on through to the front, and it looks very nice, and it states that we're looking at the Yamato, the Japanese legend. And then when we turn over on our first page there, we have a little bit of history, which isn't quite correct, and some basic information about the ship. So it tells you it was hit by 13 torpedoes. Well, we know it was 16 torpedoes. Yeah, so multiple languages.
but nicely presented. And then we have our first page proper, which they're calling page 3, which is our paint call outs for the paintwork. So this is very typical of the trumpeter format. We've got everything on one page. There'll be no detail within the instructions, I'm sure, on what colour to paint things. So some additional research will be required. We can see that there are some decals being called out here as well. Quite small actually, A4, when you consider that a Tamiya 1:350 scale will have a great big to scale poster almost. This feels a little sparse. What does grab my attention though is the paint list. So they list the colours. We've got 2 columns of colours, and then they're calling out Mr. Hobby, Acroson, Vallejo, Model Master, Tamiya and Humbrol stroke Hella paints. And what is interesting is the Tamiya column. So when it comes to the Tamiya column, it suggests that Tamiya don't do a colour for linoleum deck, which they do. But even more interesting, when you get to the second column, the dark green Mitsubishi for the aircraft, the natural grey Imperial Japanese Navy grey, the hull colour, and the dark green for the other type of aircraft. It suggests that Tamiya doesn't have a colour for any of them, which we know they have the Sasebo greys. It's just nonsense, really. So, as always, when it comes to a trumpeter or a Hobby Boss kit, I take that with a pinch of salt. Start again, do your own research. There are a number of companies that do paint sets to match Imperial Japanese Navy colours. For me, the very best are colour coat in terms of paint matching, but enamels are not for everyone. But you can certainly get sets from Life Colour, which are very, very good. And of course, Tamiya will do all of these colours carefully colour matched, including for the lower hull, which is their hull red, which is aimed at the Imperial Japanese Navy colour. They're calling out as cocoa brown because it is quite a red-brown colour, even more so than it looks here. Having said that, they have got the basics right. Basically, the superstructure, all the steel decks and the hull sides are all the same colour. That's the standard approach for the Imperial Japanese Navy. We've got the black funnel tops, black mast tops. It's not clear in these instructions. You could easily paint them all grey, but there is a white stripe and black tops. And they have depicted the linoleum out quite nicely there. But see, that almost looks black, doesn't it, at the back end? And then we've got a decal for the stern. So, yeah, for me, I would ignore that and start again. Page 8 now, and we're starting construction of the model. Now, trumpeter are a devil for doing this. Sometimes they start with sub-assemblies, and sometimes they start with the construction and you assemble as you go. There is no rhyme or reason as to which one you're going to get in your instructions. The Scharnhorst, for example, that they released had a fairly logical build construction without the sub-assemblies at the start. This has all the sub-assemblies at the start for the ship's boats. So you're not going to be adding the ship's boats until right at the end of the build, most likely. So why are you going to build them up now? This is a big kit. For anybody, it's going to take several months to build. Why would you be building all this just to put these small delicate parts into storage? Makes no sense. So for me, as always with big projects, you need to go through the instructions, divide these up and renumber them in a sequence that makes sense to how you want to build the model. But what we can see is we've got plenty of ship's boats. So a lot of the ship's boats were actually stowed away on the Yamato. So one of the criticisms often aimed at a kit of Yamato, regardless of its scale, is it doesn't have enough ship's boats. But that's not the case in this kit. That's the ship's boats. They look quite detailed in their own right, with separate engines, separate thwarts and what have you. So yeah, I quite like those. So step 3 is all of that, and that's yet another issue. You need to, because of the sheer number of parts being put together, you need to break that down into more steps. But step 3 is basically building the aircraft. You can see we've got 2 different types here. So again, I'd need to check my references to be sure exactly what aircraft were on there and in what numbers. Step 4 is dealing with making sure that your hull is correctly held together. It's not suggesting you do any gluing, but it is 2 separate halves that are not fixed together, just braced. So that probably needs looking at. Definitely feel like we should be gluing that together. Then in step 5 we are adding the deck area at the back, which has both the aircraft and the boat hangars in here. We can see the lower hangar area here. The crane lifts them up, but we've also got on either side of that, underneath at that level, we've got the boat hangar, which is what this opening here is for. There's a little rail that they come out on, and then looks like the hangar doors are modelled closed only, both for the aircraft and the boats. So if you actually want to see the boats in the hangar area, you are going to have to modify the hinge, I would think. So we can see the decks going in. That's multiple decks being put together, I think, although it's not clearly saying that, other than I can see 3 different references. Okay, so the rudder is being mounted there. I'm not going to comment on the rudder now. I will do when we do our more detailed review. Suffice to say, that is wrong in more ways than one. Both of those are wrong in more ways than one. Then we've got our shaft lines going on. The obvious comment here is that we've got no zinc anodes, which should be on both the hull and I think on the A-frames, but I'd need to double check that, but certainly they have them running on the inside of the hull there. And then we are building up the supports underneath this deck that overhangs the hull edge there. We can see the boat hanger rail, and then we can see all these supports, and that's quite a nice representation of it, but it isn't accurate. It absolutely isn't accurate. So the rail here is blanked off with a piece that follows the shape of the curve there and finishes it off, and the shape of these brackets is slightly off. The gussets are different to that, but when we come to look at the parts, we can show you some comparison photographs of what it should look like and what you've actually got. But there are definitely issues there, and that's before we even talk about that, which again we'll do when the plastic's in our hands. But yes, okay. Step 14, and the major thing happening here is the adding of some grills and the linoleum walkways, and it's nice to see they've got these correct, because the 2 sister ships have different arrangements, so different angle and slightly different dimensions to the deck edging on our Yamato sister ship, and you don't get that little cut off corner. This runs up to this flat edge, so it's nice to see they've got that right. That's an easy mistake to have made, and it's photo etch, which means we should be able to paint it in linoleum. then skim off the paint from the top and get all the little brass strips in, and that'll look really, really nice. So that's really good. And more scuppers in step 20. It's nice that these are all individual parts. It means the detail will be nice and sharp and almost missable, hidden here without any real directional arrows. There's a tiny little one here and here, but we're adding a boom on. Now the boom should be the same colour as the hull. Nice to see we've got a separate chrysanthemum. That means it's just that bit easier to paint because obviously it's a golden colour. And then we've got some photo etch detail going on. Ammunition boxes being added. So it's interesting that we're doing that before other items are being placed. Some of these are hatches as well. So there's a variety of different things going on here. Again, check your references for positioning. Now this is interesting. Step 33, we're adding some of the bases for the gun positions of various types. Now this row of guns here on each side of the hull, slightly overhanging, some of these were added 1945, but you could potentially not drill those holes out, not add them on, and build a Yamato in a 45 configuration. The main difference is the addition of guns. Obviously you want to check that there was no other changes, radars and that sort of stuff, which were quite often upgraded as you went along, but potentially you could build at a particular point of time in a life different to the intended 1945. So I think that's really quite interesting. Step 35, and I've got a little bit of an issue with this step. Most of this is fine, the capstan's going on, some vents and other bits and pieces being added in place. Have no issues with any of that. I do, however, have issues with this, and I have more than one issue with it. My first issue is that these were put on in 45 and they actually butted up against splinter shields. So there should be some splinter shields, and these go around the outside. My next issue is the shape. The shape is totally wrong. They followed the shape of the splinter shield, which was more angular, not curved, so that is totally wrong. And my third issue is the way they've stacked them. You would not stack those bags on top of each other like that. They would have been interlocked to make them much more sturdy. So I think you're probably going to want to get a little saw and cut them into individual sets of two like that, so that you can firstly change the shape and secondly stack them differently. So just to prove my point, you can see here the splinter shields. This is April 45 in the last configuration. It shows you the splinter shield there. It has a white stripe for visibility at night. So that's your splinter shield around there, but you can see here it's quite angular, and there should be a splinter shield there, and then the bags go around the outside, so we know that is an error. Step 40, and we are starting on the construction of the main superstructure island, and most of what we're doing here is adding some photo etch ladders. So I would guess that this has been slide moulded, and then we've got some bulkheads going on to be able to allow them to mould fine detailing, which is nice to see. So we have some covers going on and a back bulkhead there and a little bit of hole drilling to do. When we flip over to page 41, we can see we've got a deck piece going on there, and a little piece underneath that's the support for it, which all looks correct. And then we start in 42 building up some gun tubs. Then it's asking us to make two of these. It'd be interesting to see, this is all photo etch, be interesting to see what these bedspread radars look like. and then that goes on. That's quite a prominent part of the ship, so it needs to look right, that. So step 66 starts our main mast construction. Very distinctive mast it is too. So we're starting by building up the tripod, and then we've got these radio antennas being added at each side. Then we've got some photo etch structure going in, which is going to add some of that nice finesse and detail to this strange triangular structure with you've got the main mast and 2 yards going off at an angle. It's quite a distinctive mast. Nice to see that they've included all the ladders going up it, so there's lots and lots of ladders, nice and busy. Like I said before, it's not showing you where to paint various bits, but there should be 2 little white stripes and then the rest of it is black. I'm guessing, without double checking, roughly in line with the funnel. So it's nice to see that as we build the funnel up, we're building it up in logical steps. Rather than it being 2 halves and you've got to marry all that up and what have you, they have thought about it and put all the different levels in. That means you're going to be able to put all the individual pipes in. So that'll look really, really authentic. So I like that. We've got a big ventilator grill going in at the back. Then the funnel continues, 2 halves for above the skirt, a nice deep funnel cap with all the structure inside, and in fact actually in there you'd have some ladders, and this is all riveted together, but what they have added is more than sufficient for this. You paint all of that black, pops down inside, put your handrail on, and then you've got what looks like a plastic part going over the top. Then we've got some searchlights going on. Nice to see we've got separate hand wheels, so they're going to be quite detailed. I'm not sure if L is clear parts. I'd like to hope it was. It would look really nice if they're clear parts. And then finally the funnel being attached in that centre there. I think I might be tempted to add the mast after. It depends on how much access you've got, but definitely worth looking at. Step 80, and it's really nice to see these structures being added, usually completely omitted from Yamato kits. I think they are gun stops to stop the barrels swinging round where they could actually inflict damage on their own ship. That's what I think they are. But it's nice to see them being added. They're certainly a feature and usually omitted. So the level of detail is really nice. Step 89, and that completed island build is being put into place. And I'm going to be honest, I'm not sure if I will do it that way or not. Obviously, almost all of this is the same colour. So it's easy, and Japanese ships are easy to build and paint because everything's one colour. But whether I'd do that or whether I'd put the base in, having painted it up, and then build up the levels in situ, I'm not sure. But right, step 93, and I think we have a kit mistake here. So we've already talked about this area here not being correct, and we're now putting those gun emplacements in. We can see they go on little photo etch bases, so they will look really, really nice. And then you can see there's 3 here. Now if this is 1945 configuration, and I think that's an error, I think that and that shouldn't be there. I think they're additional guns. So if we look here, this is Yamato's arrangement, April 45. We can see we've got all those anti-aircraft guns there, which is as it's depicted on the kit. And then we can see there's a gun there, and there's a gun there. And on the model, we've got a gun at that point there, which is that one. And then we've got a gun at that point there, but just behind the ventilators there, which is that one. But there is nothing in the middle. So I'm not sure where that's come from. That seems to be an extra one, and easy to do at this scale. And then we've got the guns being added with the blast bags. which means you're going to have, looking at them, it's a peg system. You're not going to be able to pose those unless you want to do some modifications. Then we've got all sorts of handrails, ladders, platforms, and more railings and more railings. So that, again, they're going to look really authentic, lots of detail. I think they're going to look really nice. And then when we flip to 101, we're starting on the main guns, huge guns. Each one of these about the same weight as a typical American destroyer of the period. So we can see here that we've got some photo etch going in for these plates at the bottom, so that'll look nice and to scale. We're adding the ladder, we've got a bit of drilling to do. The guns are being added into... Right, okay, you seem to have... Well, you have got an option. You can have a blast bag or no blast bag. Now, if we've got no blast bag, then... see, that lovely. Those, that's a nice addition. It's photo etch as well. Those are what hold the shape of the blast bag. So the blast bag gets bolted to that frame there and goes over the top of that, and that keeps the blast bag from sagging straight down onto the gun. So that's what those are, and it's nice to see them. You see them on the construction photos of the sister ship. I don't think they were ever seen on Yamato, but they were there, same basic principle. So that's a nice option. So you could show some with blast bags on in place and then one with its blast bag off maybe. That could be really interesting. And independently posable, which is nice as well. Then completing the gun, some gun emplacements going on the top, more railings. Make 2 of those, so there are some differences between the main guns. Then as we flip it over, we're adding all of that primary armament into place there. So we can see the 3 main guns, the 2 secondary guns going on. Absolutely bristling in guns. Step 107, reassuringly they've included railings for the deck, so that's really nice. So we can see the railings are pre-shaped with cutouts for the bollards and bits. Seem to be mirroring on each side. What does appear to be missing here is this little point here. Get you a bit closer. That little point there. There should be a little ramp on each side. And I think they could actually push that out and stand on it, and it was to help them sort of dock the ship. And then they'd be pulled back, and they sat there like little ramps, little ski jumps there, but they seem to be omitted, so you're going to have to scratch build those if you want to add them. 110 and 111, sensibly the jackstaff's going on towards the end. This one here at the stern certainly looks like a simplified form of the jackstaff. They should be sticking out to the sides, those little lamps there. They weren't in a row at the back, they were sticking out at different heights on the sides. So again, check your references and decide if you want to modify that or not. Step 112, and we're adding the davits, and what I like is the fact that they've given you options of stowed or erected. That's really nice. So they're on little pins, and you could pull a pin out and it would hinge down, which is, if you've ever seen the Tamiya kits, how Tamiya always depict them in this swung down position along the sides. But that means that some of those ship's boats that we built right at the start of the build, we could now sling from there if you knew which ones went where. Step 115 deals with the crane, and there is a lot of parts in here. We've got plastic photo etch that's going around the edge to add detail, photo etch gussets, and that's a lot of detail being added to the underside of the crane there. And then we've got the wheels being built up. There is no rigging for it, so some easy line or something would be needed. And then at 116 we've suddenly gone glossy, so we know we're on the back page now. 116 we're building up the catapult. So that's going to be slide moulded plastic by the looks of it. very much like they did on their Arizona, which had lots of nice detail anyway. We've got the inner workings there, we've got the pulley wheels in photo etch, so there's lots of details on those as well, and then they go on their little rotating plate, so you could then position them as you wanted, either in their stowed position as they are there, or swung out into straight behind position, or off at that angle. So lots of options. You can have the crane with a plane slung underneath, being lifted out of there, or being lifted from the sea back onto the ship. Lots and lots of options. 117, I think that's our last step. 117 steps, but actually there is so many steps within each one that you're probably at 300 steps, something like that. Loads and loads of things to do. It's a busy old build, isn't it?
Okay, let's have a look at the decals. Trumpeter decals usually are very underwhelming, and these are no different. What we've got is one large sheet of decals, not the two that's depicted in the instructions, and we've got decals for the two different types of aircraft there. Then we have a number of decals which have numbers on them. I'm not quite sure what they're for, but I'm sure it'll become clear when we study the instructions more closely. Then we have the flags and pennants in both square and fluttering format, and then we have the markings for the funnel, the stern, and then the bow flagstaff flag. So with these, I think if you use the square ones and put them on some foil, that's better than using the fluttering ones and trying to shape them, just my view. But yes, we've got all the flags that we need. What have we not got? Anyone who watches my channel knows the next thing that's coming. There are no depth markings for the hull whatsoever. Complete omission. I just don't understand why they don't put them in. All ships have them. We should have some white depth markers here for several places along the length of the hull. You can buy them separately. They're not too expensive, although they tend to be readily available in the US and difficult to get hold of in the UK without paying a huge amount of money. It costs more to have them shipped to you than the actual cost of the decals, so it's just a bit bonkers. But you're going to have to do something because there are no depth markers whatsoever. Other than that, the decals feel a little bit chunky. I can see there's quite a bit of uneven carrier film around them, so removing them from the sheet, I think a little bit of trimming might be in order, especially the flags, where we can see there's a good 0.5 millimetre or more of decal film going around the outside of the flags. Right, box A, a little bit too big to fit into the camera view, so let's see what we get inside. Wow, it is packed to the gunnels with plastic parts. These look mainly structural, so let's take a closer look. So I'm going to start with the base for the superstructure island. So it's a whopping piece of plastic. As we look at the edges, we've got all the vents in place, we've got some handrails and parts for location of other parts. We've got a door that strangely looks upside down. I'm assuming that's right, but we'd have to check our references. There's more of them there. Let's hope they've not put them on upside down. That would be quite amusing. What I can feel, yeah, we've got scuttles. I think they could be drilled out. I think they're below the line of that, so that's okay. And they all look square in this instance, which is good, but they are, you know, there's nothing on a curve to cause us a problem. We've got hand rungs there that are moulded in, so you might want to, and there, you might want to take them off and replace them with photo etch ones. White Ensign models do a set in 200 scale, which comes with a little drilling jig, and you can then put them in. So that all looks very nice. There's a little mould seam there, which perhaps won't be noticeable in the rivets too much, but will need to be removed from everywhere else. Again, here as well. Nothing wrong with that. Very nicely done, no issues with it. Next we have the two side extension pieces for the base of the superstructure, and we've got a lovely textured steel deck. I don't know if the camera can pick that up. There's a lovely texture on there, all to scale, very nice. There's a few doors and again some more hand irons, but otherwise there is not much in the way of detail on that. I guess more detail gets added. There's a mould seam there that needs to be sorted, and it's on both sides, and another one at the front. That is it. So minimal work again, and again all the tabs are underneath, so you can just cut it off, sand it flush, job's a good one. So yeah, they're protecting the gun barrels there, which are nicely done, and yes, we have hollow openings in them. At that sort of size, that's really quite impressive. That's very nice. Same with these deck machine guns, open barrels at the end. That's lovely. Then we've got ammunition lockers, which again have a nice level of detail on the top surface, which is the bit you'll see. And then we've got gun tubs. These have some nice textured deck in them. I wonder if we should actually have more gussets than that, but I'm not sure. There's a lip on the gun tubs as well, which is what makes them look a bit thicker than you might expect, but that's all correct. And then we've got some fire control bases at the side. Again, there's more parts to be put on those. Got a slightly damaged gun there, but I'm not going to mess with it. We'll wrap it back up. You can see there, we should be able to sort that though. All very nice. Some nice details on the gun. All looks good. Sprue ZG, some slide molded parts. We've got range finding parts on each side, and then we've got the big deck ventilators that go fore and after of the main superstructure island. If we start with those, we know we've got extra parts to go on, but we've got a lovely deck texture there. And then that's followed around with doors with the little handles moulded in. Platform is nice and thin. Then as we go around the edge, we've got a little bit of a mould seam that we're going to have to sort out, but we've got the rivet detail on there, little hatches on the top, more rivet detail. This one, got some hand irons moulded on. Again, you probably, depending on how you want to do it, some people want to leave them on and just put a wash on them, and others will want to take them off and make them stand out right as they should do. You can see lots of rivet detail on there, which is nice. Got more parts to go onto there and there in terms of ventilation grills, and we can see all the little indentations ready for the railings. So placing the railings will have to be absolutely accurate, so your bending skills are gonna be tested on this. Yeah, that looks lovely. Then when we come to the bakes for the rangefinders, we know from the instructions there's a ton of stuff going on here, but what we've got is very nice. The shutters are all closed, but the level of detail is lovely. Under paint, these will really start standing out because there's so much little rivet detail on that I can't see, but I can feel.
Look at this back one. Yeah, exactly the same. And there's going to be no issues with cleanup because of the way the sprue gates attach. It's lovely, that. Really, really nice. Sprue B now, and our big parts are the rudders. We've got the bulkheads there for, I think that's going into the boat hangar. We've got the aircraft hangar doors and frame, boat hangar door frames and doors. We've got the bases there for the catapult turntables. We've got the A-frames for the propeller shafts, and then we've got the little stern and bow towing fair leads, and then we've got the chrysanthemum. So, oh, and that's the railing for the ship's boats, I think. So what is obviously wrong is the rudders, both of them. The shape is incorrect and the surface detail is incorrect. Massively wrong, massively wrong. The same with the bow towing points. The shape of that is wrong. It's completely wrong. And the same with the chrysanthemum. It's oversimplified, which at 1/350 scale is fine, but at 1/200 scale isn't. It should have petals between the petals, and they've not got it, so they've made it a bit basic. Otherwise, we've got nice crisp moulded parts. There is no flash. These are big chunky thick bits of plastic, and there's no sink or anything in them. Not quite sure what those parts are, can't remember. We've got some detail on there with handrails and hatches and covered scuttles, which all looks nice. And I've got to say, the A-frames for the shaft lines are nice and thin, they're not chunky. As always, you've got a big thick seam going through them, so there's some cleanup to be done before you paint them and then attach them. But yeah, otherwise that looks all okay. No issues with any of that other than what I've just said. And if you're a rivet counter, then watch the next video and get a deeper understanding of what needs to be done to get this accurate. Now, and we've got a lot of structural parts on here one way or another. So there's a lot of bases for gun tubs we can see dotted all over. We've got the observation deck there, bit more bulkhead, all the scuttles have eyebrows. Just look at the detail on that, that's nice. Unfortunately, the scuttles are elongated again there, so you may want to fill and drill. So a lot of structural parts in there. And we've got some more ventilators there. Detail is nice. All the moulding is nice and crisp. We've not got any significant issues, although that looks a bit scrappy there and there. See if we can pick that up on camera a bit better. Yeah, we're going to have to do a bit of fill and sand on that to get that smooth, but it's not a major issue. No texturing on that deck, so I assume that is correct. So we've got here, we've got some ventilators, some structures. That looks like an aircraft catapult frame. We've got two halves of a ventilator there, the breakwater, pipework for the funnel, which is all nicely done with openings in them, which is lovely. It's covered up. Then we've got, that's the skirt there for the funnel with the pipe bases, which looks really nice. Seems to have the right shape to it, so that's very, very good. That's another funnel skirt, more pipe work there, some covers, more gun placements. That's our, I think that is our bonnets for the anchor chains on the bow. I think so, in which case the shape is slightly wrong, but then this deck area here, it's got some lovely texturing on. We've got two different types of texture on, so they've not skimped, they've done it right, paid attention to the detail. Look at all the gussetry there, that just looks right, doesn't it? Yeah, that is nice. I can't see any issues in terms of flash or seams or sink. It's all sharp. It's all very nicely done. Yeah. G is in a bubble wrapped bag. I've not seen Trumpeter do that before. Usually delicate parts get a bit of foam wrap and then they go in the same standard clear plastic bag. So that's quite an interesting little update. And the next sprue out is again in a bubble wrapped bag as well. And you can see why. We have the parts here for, well, that's your yard arms basically. Look how delicate that is. Very nice. And then we've got the frames for the gun tubs with lots of little ejector pins, so a lot of little cleanup on those, but worth it to get it right. And that just looks lovely, doesn't it? Got all the little angles done. Really nice. Next bag, as I've said, is bubble wrapped, and we seem to have two of the same sprue, which is sprue J. And again, we can see why this is bubble wrapped. So let me flip it that way. We can see we've got the support structure that supports the deck overhanging at the stern there where the boats come out. We've got lots of little scuppers there. We've already seen some of them. We've got the base for the secondary armament. We've got the catapult slide molded, and then we've got our davits in both the stowed and erected formats. And then we've got all sorts of little small parts there, and that looks like turntable for, it's probably the mount for the catapult actually, as it's on this sprue, which has got some nice deck texturing. That part's got slightly crushed. We'll just put it back. We've got binoculars and more little vents. The anchor there, which is very nicely done. More little vents. Vents have got openings, and look at the anchor. Beautiful bit of slide moulding. We've got all sorts of details being put on there. It's well engineered. When we look at the catapult, I can feel all the rivets. It feels very busy actually. So that's nice. We've got the top of the catapult there. Life preserver. That's your D-ring for the top of the anchor and the anchor shaft. That's our boom. Goes on the side of the ship there. And then we have the propellers. and I'm not quite sure of the shape of those. I think we'll come back to those in the next video and take a view. They're certainly very thin, really, really thin. Let's see if I can get it on camera. There you go, look at how thin that is, wafer thin. I'm just not sure that the curve is right. So, we've got our spare anchor there. It's got nice detail on it. We flip that over. You can see there's some lovely detail on there. That looks nice. So we have two of these sprues. Sprue M now, and we've got more gun tubs, again with some nice deck texturing. We've got some superstructure parts there, and look at that, it's just lovely. On the end here we've got some slide molded components with doors on, bit of seam to sand off, but none of the seam has been major issue. Nice ventilator detail. And then on this end we've got a building again with doors on, nice scuttles, textured top. As we look at that, we can see the famous shaped ventilators. This is quite a prominent part of the ship and it looks absolutely spot on. Love it. There's no texturing on that deck, so I imagine that must be correct, as they've done so much texturing on other decks. And then we have these bags. You can see how they stack on top of each other. There's pins which locate in these holes. We've already discussed the fact that they are the wrong shape and stacked incorrectly. So you would need to do your research or watch the next video where we'll talk about it in more detail. Nothing wrong with that though, all very, very nice. Sprue out of box A is sprue D, which has a massive area of nothingness in it, which is quite odd, isn't it? Secondary gun tower. We've got the chocks there for the boats, the little stands for the boats, which are nicely detailed. Ventilators, I think they're for I think those are the ventilators that face the power vanes at the front there. And then we've got the ship's boats. There's no wood deck depicted, so I imagine these must have been steel deck. We'll need to look at our references for painting those. Tamiya do a Japanese Navy utility boat set, so that's probably a good reference for getting your paint colours right. Yeah, and then we've got, look at those slide moulded vents for them. They all look lovely, and more ventilators. Moulded on details are nice and crisp. We've not got open windows, so we'll have to paint them in, but that's not a big issue. We've got no ejector pins in that one, which we'll be able to see through the thwarts. There should be a little engine block to go in there somewhere. Might not be on this sprue though. And we can see the little prop shafts there. I can't see the propellers, so they must be on a different sprue. But all very nice. Ship's boats look correct in terms of shape and form. No sink. With these big parts, sometimes you can get some sink, but these all look great. Box B next, and another top opening, fairly sizable box, so let's see what presents itself when that's opened. So at the bottom of this box we have the 4 metal shafts provided for the shaft lines. So all in all there's 13 frets of photo etch. We've got 2 there which primarily deals with the railings for the ship, and we've also got these funny looking ones here are the tracks. They get bent over to make a double thickness track. So all the track that goes on the stern areas for moving the aircraft is bent over. So we have 2 of the same fret E's which covers the track, and a large part of the deck railing there. And then we have more deck railing on these. Again, this is another 2 frets which are the same, which is G. And we can see in addition to that we've got the shutters for the various different guns and directors. We've got the bases for the deck guns. We've got some ladders and some small parts. And that looks like ships' aircraft cradles. Fret D, and again this is 2 in the bag that are the same. We can see we've got lots of the grab rails and bits and pieces for the guns, more of those louvre shutter type things, and bits and pieces for the guns, including some of the triple anti-aircraft gun fittings. We've got all sorts of tiny little bits and pieces there, and some of the strips of rivets as well. Fret A, and that's got components for the crane, and it's got ladders. I'm not quite sure what that is, if that's for the crane or not. Some of these big parts here are for the inside of the funnel top, and we've got indeed some of the funnel construction parts here, grab rails, walkways, and I think those are the bridge windows there. Fairly sure of it, and we can see there is bend points there, which we talked about when we looked at the instructions. We flip this over to sprue B. We've got the gratings that we see on the stern area. We've got some steel deck fittings, more handrails and things for the guns, and some ladders, and walkways for under the rangefinders. All very nice. And there's some propellers there for the ship's boats. Fret C now, and again we have 2 of these. Lots more bits of railing, handrails, and parts for the funnel. We've got the little radio antennas for the mast there, parts for the funnel cap, more bits for the ship boats, and some gussets. All very nice, nothing wrong with that. Fret D, we actually have 4, not 2 of these, and you can see that we've got things like the cable reels on there and bits that we've seen before for the guns. Lots of handrails. Okay, the last fret of photo etch has got the other part of the crane, the tower part. Not quite sure what those are. I don't remember seeing them in the instructions. We have the supports for the mast, more railings, more ladders, and then we have the walkways, the linoleum walkways, and they've actually put all the little fastener bolts on for the brass strips, which is actually going to make it a little bit more difficult to clean it up and get it back down to brass. If they'd left it smooth, I would have said, but they've not put the fastener heads on. Now they've put the fastener heads on, I'm going, it would have been easier if it was smooth, so they can't win. But it's a very nice detail. But yeah, they need to be, in between needs to be linoleum, and the sort of crosshatch needs to be brass when finished. Sprue L, we have 2 of these in one bubble wrapped bag, and we can see that that is mainly dealing with the secondary armament, which is a nice slide moulded piece. It's got some lovely detail on there, and it accurately captures this edge with all the little support gussets in there. That's a really nice bit of moulding. Very lovely, that. Then we've got what look like the turntables for the aircraft track. We've got some more guns, although these weren't wrapped in foam. They're pretty much the same as the other ones that were. The searchlights, unfortunately, are solid plastic, not clear, so that's a little bit disappointing, a little bit. Then we've got the range finders there, tops and bottoms, bottom of the turret. And then we've got the guns, which are hollow, as we'd expect, given that even the tiny ones have got hollow ends. And we've got blast bags that they look, well, I mean, they look a bit generic because they're all the same, but a bit lacking in creases, I think, maybe is what I want to say. And then we've got some other guns here, again, hollowed out ends, very nicely done. And then at the end here, we've got a couple of structures that are very busy, part of the fire control, I think. More guns here, anti-aircraft triple mounts, and then more scuppers, and the pyrovanes with their wings that go on underneath there, and then I think it's a photo etch top, which should be right and look accurate. See what I mean about the guns just lacking a little bit of something in the blast bag. But that is a thing of beauty. Really nice. Next out of our box is the rear steel deck section. And we have some seam line that goes along there, and then out there we have that on both sides. That's not part of the structure of the ship, it's definitely moulding seam, so a gentle sand is required to remove that. Otherwise it's quite nicely done. I wonder if on the real ship these centre deck squares are wider than the rest of them. They're not there, but they are there. So as we turn it over, we have got some ejector pin marks that will need to be filled because some of this overhangs and we've got support structure, so it will be visible. They are recessed, so they'll need fill and file. Otherwise, that looks okay. Obviously, we're not checking shape or anything at this stage. We'll do that in the next video, but that all looks all right, doesn't it? Nice hefty bit of plastic. Our next bag has 3 U sprues, and these are our guns. So this is 1 gun per sprue by the looks of it. So we have a very nicely detailed slide moulded main piece here. Detail on that is lovely. And I think we have a photo etch end that goes in there. Then we've got what looks like the base, which has a nice textured steel diamond pattern in there, and then another textured base, and I think that is the bit that mounts underneath there. And then this piece fits on top of that there, and then that should mount onto those parts there and all come together in there. So all part of one gun, so we've got 3 of these. Nothing wrong with that, all lovely. So our next bag has 3 sprues in, all containing the main gun turret. So let's have a close look at that. So if we start at the turret, we can see that we've got the right shape there with the interlocking armoured plates. We've got some nice detail over the top and the location points for all the various railings, and more plastic parts to go on, including the viewfinders. We've got a door at the rear and what I think is a light. And then we've got the fasteners for the blast bags on the front there. So that all looks nice as it is. It's a nice moulding, no issues with that. And we've got the base, and these are the parts that fit into the base. We've not got the mounts on this sprue, but this is the bit that will go into the mount, and then the main gun is going into that or the blast bag, depending on how you want to mount it. So if you go into the blast bag, I think you're dispensing with that, and the blast bag appears to mount straight into the opening. And again, the blast bags are looking a little bit under detailed. I would have expected a little bit more of a crease from the canvas bags. The shape itself isn't too bad, but it's all a bit generic. So you might want to do something to put some of your own creases in or change it around a little bit. Obviously, we have the option to not have the blast bag on, which shows off the lovely internals of that, and that might be an option to do some guns with blast bags on and some without. I think certainly that's going to be my thought process. Then we've got a couple of gun tubs there with some nice texturing and plenty of gussets, so I like the look of those. And then we've got the main guns themselves, which look really nice. You paint the inside of those in a sort of chrome silver, and then the outside in the Sasebo grey. That looks really nice. And then there is some photo etch and other details to be added onto them. But yeah, they look the part. Quite a heavy seam on them though. Surprising amount of cleanup on those. That's probably the heaviest seam that we've seen, and on a part that you really don't want to be cleaning seam up on, because you run the risk of misshaping the part. So a lot of care needed with sorting that out. Bit of a scrape and maybe a flexi file would be the best way forward with that. But yeah, otherwise that all looks very nice. Our next sprue, sprue S, there's only one of these. We've got more gun tubs. They've got a lovely texture inside on the deck, as has everything. And then we've got some gussets. Now, they're a little bit thick, but to be honest, once you've got the gun in place, you're only going to get a glimpse of them, and that's what you're after, just some reassurance that they're in there. The gun tubs themselves have a lip, which helps with the thick look of them. So actually, I think they'll look all right under paint. And then we've got another 2 gun mounts there, which I suspect fit into that, and are the ones that we see at the stern, which are fitted right at the back end of the build. And some nice detailing on there, although that's completely blank, so we'd need to just check that. The sprue gates connect on the top surface, so again, you nip them off flush and you've got minimal cleanup and away you go. So they have really engineered this well.
I like it. Box C, and we've got, surprise, surprise, more plastic. We've got the funnel parts in there, and if I take these out, you'll see that we've then got another box within the box, which is protecting our very delicate mass parts and our clear plastic. So looking in the first bag of clear parts, we've got 2 sprues, identical. So we've got 2 of the same aircraft here. So this is sprue F1M2. And as is Trumpeter's Way, the whole of the aircraft is in clear. I'm not a fan of it. You know, at the end of the day, the only thing you want clear is the cockpit, and in this instance it's a little glass triangle there, and that is pretty much it. So why do all of this in clear plastic? It's harder to work with in terms of clean up and cutting, and it's harder to work with in terms of paint as well. So I'm not a fan of them doing the whole thing in clear, but that's what they have done. The wings themselves look really nice. We've got panel lines on them, which we can see more than feel, so that means they're not too deep. Fuselage attaches through the middle, so shouldn't be too difficult to put together. We can see the wing location point there, and then we've got the floats for the wing tips, and then the main floats. I'm guessing there is some photo etch or some structure to add, and then you've got the 2 braces for supporting the wings, and the spinner and propeller are moulded together. And actually I was a bit concerned when I saw it as plastic, but actually they're not too bad at all, so quite happy with that. Okay, sprue A1CH1, strange names. We've got 2 of these, so in total we've got 4 aircraft on the kit. This is a different type of aircraft, single wing. Again, nicely done with the panel lines. The floats are in 2 halves on this one, as is the fuselage. Then we've got separate cowling and spinner and propeller like before. And there's a bit of sink there, but I think that will actually glue into the fuselage section just there, so won't be seen. And this is where the clear bit pays off. You get the nice canopy, which if you mask carefully and then paint carefully will look quite nice. So our next sprue is H, coming out of the bubble wrap bag. And you can see here we've got the delicate parts. We've got the mast, we've got some of the frames for over the gun pods, we've got the jack staffs, so all very delicate thin parts. We've also got the base for the crane there, block and tackle and the hook. There's a small amount of sink in there. That's the first time I've seen some sink that really needs to be filled other than in the aircraft hangar. We've got the little structures that go on the sort of the arrays that go on top of the secondary armament there. All very nice, delicate parts. You can see here on the jack staff the lights. Like I say, they're in the wrong angle, so you could carefully cut them off and glue them back on at the right angle. But we'll look at that more closely
in video 3 when we're looking at rivet counting the superstructure. Right, this is a little strange, but the next bag out is clearly a stand. It has nothing on it. There is no decal for it, I don't think. And there was no photo etch for it, I don't think. So that's a bit odd, really. I'm sure I'm right in saying that I didn't see a decal for it. Again, has 2 sprues in them. Sprue K, which, as you can see, is focused on ships, boats once again, which are nicely moulded with decks and thwarts separate. And we've got detail inside, we've got deck planking, and then we've got some slide moulded structures to go on them, on the motor launchers. So painted up, they should look nice. Detail is lovely on them. Look at the skylight on that. Really nice. Scuttles look slightly elongated, but they're not too bad. And I'm guessing the raised lumps are supposed to be windscreen, so we'd have to look at that. Really quite nice. No issues with that. Nice and crisp. Very nice. Right, next out of the bag is the bow deck, which is steel checker plate. We've got a nice thick casting there for the hose pipe entry, and the centre anchor hole there is nicely done. Again, these I think will need caps putting on to make them look a little bit more authentic. And then we've got a raised chain plate which takes us up to the capstans and down to the bonnets. Strangely, I think some of the plating, which is nicely depicted in rectangular lengths, has not been fully scribed on. So you can see here we've got a line going up to there. It stops, but it doesn't carry on. And then on the other side of this joint, there is no line again. And I think that should carry on. If I bring it a bit closer, you'll see. I think that butt joint should have a line that carries on in the length of that line, that goes on past that joint and terminates there. I think we have lines missing for the steel decks. So you're going to have to scribe them in yourself, which will be tricky because they're very fine. Even a very fine razor saw is going to open that up a little bit more than those. So you might end up having to go over all of them to get them to look uniform. Yeah, that's not great. That is not great. Probably an easier fix than I'm imagining. At least it's all straight lines. But everything else seems to be very nice. Good thick piece of plastic, that. So we have 2 W sprues with gun tubs to go on the superstructure because we've got gussets underneath them. We've also got a fair number of ejector pins, sunken again, so they'll have to be filled. And then we've got the sort of horn radar system, very nicely slide moulded. They go together as a pair. Yeah, very nicely done. Ever so slight seam on them, so a bit of careful cleanup needed on that. Then we've got the shelter for the end of the stern deck just before the hangar recess. Looks like some binoculars or something. We've got some deck structures. Yeah, they are lovely. Look at that, really nice. So they're not foghorns, they're a sort of radar system. The last plastic sprue is F, and that's dealing with the main structures of the funnel. And we can see very nicely done. We've got some pipe work there, lovely riveting. We can see mounting points there for things, and more hand irons that perhaps you might want to replace. More rivet detail, very nicely done. It's really lovely. And then we've got the upper structure that goes above the skirt. We can see all our mounting points for our various different funnels. We've got the rows of rivets. That looks really nice as well. And this is all slide moulded. Yeah, lovely, really nice. No issues with that at all. Box D, once again, the sheer size of this model is hitting home. Look at the width of that, it's just immense. Right, so we've got two sections of deck in there. My first comment on this section of deck is it's all wood and it's all one piece, so we've got no joins whatsoever in the wood deck, so that is really helpful. It's going to be really easy to paint this if that's what you want to do. So yeah, looks really, really good. The other point is there is no blemishes on this because, if you remember from the instructions, all the location points are drilled through from underneath. So that means we don't have to drill through location points for things that we think might be wrong, and we still get the full effect of the deck. So where we think there's an extra gun position, we don't have to drill that out, and that's just an easy, quick solving of that issue by simply not adding it. So that's really nice. The fact that most of the detail gets added by you putting the location holes in is really helpful. So you'll have to go through it carefully. But once you've mapped out what should be where it is and you've checked that the positions are correct, you can then drill your location holes yourself. You know, I might be tempted to actually drill some of these holes from this side when you come in to fit it. That's certainly an option, but you'd have to get your measurements absolutely accurate, whereas Trumpeter have largely done it for you, and most of this in the main is in the right place. So again, just check what you're doing, proceed with care, and you should be fine. I can see there is some form of sink line there. I don't know if the camera's picking that up at all. Just there. Doesn't seem to follow through on this side. Whether that's going to show on paint, I don't know. Possibly not. It's always difficult with plastic. Sometimes you can witness things that just disappear when they're painted. Otherwise, I see no issues. The planking is nicely depicted. Whether it's to scale or not, I don't know. I imagine it's oversized, but it certainly looks the part. There's very little detail on the deck actually, which is good. It means it's all being added. So other than some location points, that is it. And then that's where it butts up with a steel deck. And we can see the little slope in the deck there. Very nice indeed. The other deck in the box is our hanger deck, and as you can see, we've got some lovely deck texturing there. It's really, really nice with the checker plate. We can see in the lower hanger we've not got deck texturing, so I just want to check that out and make sure that that's correct at some point. I've got some damage on mine. You can see there. At some point it's had an impact damage, so that's how it should look, but it's been given a wallop, so that is disappointing. That the way this is packaged, that has to have happened in the factory before it was packed, so that's disappointing. Nothing we can't repair. we just make some plastic card template from that, cut that out and put the plastic card back in so it's all correct. So repairable. The bollards, because they're moulded in that way, they're straight and don't have caps on, so we'd need to put some caps on those. And then all these little dashes are the location points for the track for the aircraft. So they've got the correct Y-shape track there, so that's nice to see. So everything looks good there. Not a lot of detail because you're adding it all on, but it's a hefty bit of plastic. It's a real big bit of plastic. Now for some reason they'd wrap this end in foam to protect it. I'm not quite sure why. Maybe it's because of these things, but I rather suggest that's the end they needed to wrap. But anyway, yeah, there's nothing wrong with that. So an end opening box, and when we open it up, we are greeted by a lot of bags. Let's have a look what we get. Okay, so we've got a lot of slide molded parts here. So what we're going to do is we're going to push them all to one side and we'll take a look at them. Okay, so in no particular order, first bag out has a number of parts in. I think everything we need of the same part is in this same bag, which isn't the case with the other parts. And what we've got here is the Type 89 12.7 centimeter 40 caliber anti-aircraft gun. And we've got several of those. What have we got? 6, 7 of them. So my first comment is that it's been molded in such a way that the connection tab is underneath, and that is a very nice touch. That means cleanup is nice and easy. Look at that. There is some lovely detail on there. We've got the little, these should be slightly domed. They're flatter than they actually should be. If we can get this to focus. These should be slightly domed, but they're there and they look the part. We know that there's photo etch going in for extra detail. It's got the lip on, it's very finely moulded. And we've got all the detail that should be there is there. That is really nice. And then these little dots here are the location points for the railings. Now there's a little bit, if we look closely, there's a little bit of seam there to sort out. That just wants crispening up. It shouldn't quite flare out like that, but easily sorted. That is very nice indeed. Yeah, it's even got the little rivet detail on in all the right places. That is a thing of beauty. Really nice job. Next we've got 3 bags. I'm not even going to count how many there is. Lots is the answer of these things here. So this is a 13.2mm machine gun emplacement. And again, it's really lovely in its detail. You can see we've got the door at the back. I think the shape of the door is wrong. I think it's too tall. It should be more of a square hatch, about that sort of size. But that's an easy modification to make. But you've got all the rivet detail on there, which is lovely. We've got the 2 little domes in the right place, and we can see the little holes there where we're going to put railings. Again, I think the shutters have some photo etch to go on. That's a really, really nice moulded part. But yeah, lovely that. Our next bag has 4 of these rangefinders. These are the 4.5 to 1.5mm rangefinders, and there's more parts to go on. We can see location points for more plastic to go on.
and the little ears that stick out the side. But what we've got here is another nicely done part. Again, easy to remove, very little cleanup, lots of detail. That looks really, really nice. We've got the shutters on the front there. Yeah, that looks very, very nice indeed. So, yeah, there's nothing wrong with that. Another piece of gorgeous moulding. So the next bag has 4 of these, which are the Type 85 machine gun fire control towers. Lots of lovely detail. We can see we've got shutters on there, and without examining that, don't know how accurate that is, but we've got a little hatch on the top. Lots of lovely rivet detail around the side, and again moulded in such a way that you can just take the tab off, file it flat, and the job is done. That is really nice. I'm sorry that the parts keep drifting to that bottom corner, but that's so I can look at them underneath the camera. Yeah, lovely. Then we have 2 bags that have the searchlight control towers in. Again, we've got photo etch to add the shutter detail. And you can't really see much detail on here, but I can feel the lip, which is correct, and I can feel the raised rivets, which is also correct. Very nice. Next bag has lots of these slide moulded gun bases. I think they're the 25mm triple machine gun mounts, I think. Again, very nicely done. A single connection point, easy to clean up. Detail is really, really stunning. And once you've put the barrels in and maybe 1 or 2 other bits, I don't know whether we've got the seats and things to add, but they should look lovely. Our next bag has the 2 main tower sections slide moulded, very nicely presented. Yamato didn't have the pagoda style tower, it had a slightly different approach. So we look at the base unit in the first instance, so that's the bottom there. This will then go on top. I can't test fit it because we've got some connection nubs in the join there. But that will fit on there, so it looks like the fit will be nice and tight and good with minimal cleanup. So let's have a look at this base first. We've got some very nice ventilator detail. That looks very authentic. There's some moulded on details, some of which are for locating more points to be added. Some lovely detail on there, some trunking of some type. We've got 2 doors at the front. Not quite sure that they look right. They sort of look a bit tall and narrow. I'm not sure that they're quite right. Also, it's noticeable that we've got some distortion on these windows at the front here. They're slightly elongated rather than being perfectly round, so they might want to be filled, re-drilled. I guess they should have eyebrows on as well, so some 1/200 eyebrows might be in order. You can get those as a set from White Ensign models, so that would be handy. There is a little bit of slide mould seam to clean up, but it's very, very light. It's just a light sanding, and you can see it there at the back end. Other than that, it's a lovely crisp bit of moulding, as is the part of the tower that goes on top. This time we've got little gutters above the doors. We've got a platform there. Might want to take that out and replace that with some plastic card or a bit of scrap photo etch frame or something, because it's slightly triangular, gets thicker as it gets towards the base, so you might want to remove that and thin that out. When they put the others on as separate pieces, it's a bit odd that they've
moulded one in. But you can see we've got different size hatches there. They have the gutter in. We've got some moulded in handrails. Don't know whether we put photo etch on top or not. We can see some location points for other parts, if I can capture that in the light. Some nice rivet detail. I mean, the moulding of those gussets is absolutely lovely. Very crisp. Whether the angle's right, I'm not sure, but I'm sure they've had a stab at doing it right. Again, we've got some elongated scuttles there, so they want sorting out, drilling in at the correct angle. So we definitely need some eyebrows for this. Otherwise, lovely. We've got no sink. It's a fairly hefty, chunky piece of plastic, so should be easy to work with. The last bag from this box has got 4 slide moulded parts on. 2 of them are rangefinder roof housings. We know from the instructions there's an awful lot of detail going onto those, but there's a lot of detail moulded in anyway. It's really crisp and quite nice. And then this, I think, is the structure where the steel deck at the bow joins the wood deck, and we have more detail to go onto that. But look at the grills in there. It's very, very nicely depicted. Yeah, lovely. Okay, the last thing to look at is the hull, and this is going to be a little bit tricky. Okay, so the first thing we can say is it's very well packaged. It's in shaped foam with a foam packer, and that's exactly the same at the bow as well. So they've done a very, very good job. Now this is actually a 2-piece hull that's already had its supports put in. You can see some of them are metal and some of them are plastic, and then we've got this like plastic wrapping which goes all the way around it, which we're going to take off in a sec so we can have a proper look. So let's do that. So we get a true understanding of how big this model is when we get the hull out. Let me see if I can get the whole thing into shot. There we go. It's not small by any stretch of the imagination. Okay, so what we can see is we've got all the supports in. They're loosely fitted, and then these are screwed in. And the first instruction is actually to make sure that these things are not too tight but not too loose. But as we can see when we look at the back, it's not glued together at all, so we do have to do some bonding of it, and they've done a nice job. It's all there. Now that I think is a bit of a deck support, but that is the only one that I can see. I don't know whether the deck that goes in here sits on that, possibly, but yeah. So if we tip this onto its side, we can get a view, and we'll start at the bow. And the first thing I'm going to say is we've got a lump here where we should have a hole. That, I believe, is another opening for an anchor. So that will have to be opened up and hollowed out a bit like that, but the raised lump gives you the casting profile around it, so that's okay. The next thing I'm spotting is these lumps here, and it seems to be some form of hydrophone arrangement. Now we know that Imperial Japanese Navy ships all had hydrophones from around about 1935 to 1937. They were all fitted with hydrophones. So we know Yamato had hydrophones, but I have never seen any evidence of that anywhere before. And I have just spotted it and gone and had a look, and I can't find anything on hydrophones. So there is even the Yamato in the Yamato Museum doesn't have this. No other model has it. There is no evidence of it from the wreck. The anatomy of the ship doesn't reference it at all. And I can't find anybody else who's ever referenced it in any other drawing or picture. So for me, that is at best guesswork, and at worst just been added on for effect. So that needs to come off for me. For the next video, I'll try and do some more research and establish whether they should be there or not. But at this moment in time, I'm thinking remove those. The next comment I have is the plating, which I think is a little bit heavy at the bow. It's not so bad in the middle, but it seems to deepen a little bit as we get to the bow. They're stopping it in a row, and they did exactly the same on the hood, and actually this should be wrapping pretty much around. So there's a little bit of work to do to sand that into shape, and you might want to consider filling this with some very thin plastic card just to lessen the effect, which would be easier than sanding the whole thing. There is a little bit of sink that I'm noticing in the light. I have a little bit there that I can see, but other than that, not so bad. We can see the degaussing cable is already moulded in, which for most of it I don't mind, but here it gets a little bit out of shape. That's the limitations of the moulding. So whether we could replace that in some way, certainly for the hood you could buy degaussing cable separately aftermarket, and that might be an option for this. There are some hand rungs there, but they're very, very lightly moulded, almost to the point that you can hardly see them. So for me, they need to come off and be replaced by some photo etch. And then we've got the scuttles. Now, in the next video, we'll have a look at the scuttle arrangement and make sure that they're right and check all that. For now, what I can say is some of them are a little bit elongated, so you're going to want to fill them and re-drill them. And then the filled ones, well, we know on the actual ship that the filled scuttles, the covered scuttles, were 50 millimeters wider in diameter than the scuttle, which is how they covered it. But these look like they are slightly smaller or to the same size, so you might be wanting to stamp out some more and replace those possibly. But a lot of modelers, I suspect, would just accept it. There is a little bit of a dip there, some form of seam or dip or something. We have got a little plastic thing that sticks into the side there, which is the deck support, and that is causing a bit of a drop. So there's some sanding work to be done there, because that will show up under paint, especially matte paint. Okay, so if we go along the hull, that all looks okay. Again, we have a little bit of sink there, and right behind that we have some form of ejector pin or something. But it's not too bad. Assuming that these are in the right place, then it's just a matter of drilling them out. They are below the deck ridge, so that's good. Now we can follow this to the stern. Right, and then we've got slide moulding seam. I didn't notice one at the front. Let me just check. Oh yeah. Yeah, I can't. Oh yeah, there is. There's a bit lower down. There we go. And that looks like a little bit more sink near it. I think the way to go will be to put a bit of primer down on this and see what that chucks up at you. Then we've got the continuation of the degaussing cable. That's really nicely depicted. More hand irons that we probably want to replace, definitely want to replace. Okay, let's turn it upside down now. So the first thing I've spotted as we turn it over is that we do have the sea chests underneath. Although they are very basic, should be a little bit of a mesh behind those. So you could open these up as holes and put some mesh behind it, and perhaps give yourself a more authentic look. Put the struts back in. That could look quite nice. I suspect most people, because you haven't got a stand with this, are going to put this on a fairly low pedestal. So it could be work for nothing, but why not? Obviously, without checking our references, we don't know how accurate the plating pattern is, but we have got it all the way around, and that is lovely to see. As we get to the front, I suspect the pattern is not correct. It sort of just merges into one there to the front, and then we've already talked about that. You've got the bulbous bow, which gave the Yamato a fair bit more speed considering the weight she was carrying. The bilge keels are nice and thin. No issues with that. And I'm just looking. Yeah, we've got a little bit of a moulding witness there. Yeah, I definitely think putting some primer down on this so you can see any defects. I've got a little bit of sink there. There's just one or two little bits. That's quite chunky. If that's right, I'm not sure. I doubt that that pattern there is. And then we've got this, and that's bothering me a little bit. That doesn't seem right at all. I think we'll come back to the stern in a sec. But we've got some lovely patternation on it all the way through this hull. If you're just wanting to build it and you put some paint down on this, it will look really, really nice. Give it a little bit of a wash just to bring out the plates, and that will be really nice. And obviously most of this hull is riveted. There was quite a bit of welding done on Yamato, but it tended to be on superstructure, so all of this was riveted. In fact, it was one of the issues, was there were some issues with the quality of the riveting. Certainly on the sister ship, that attributed to her sinking so quickly, because the rivets basically failed. But yeah, let's turn her over. So this stern is bothering me a little bit, and I've not got my references to hand, and in the next video we'll have a look at it more closely, but that does not look right to me. As I remember it, there is a lip which they've got. You can see the lip there, although it seems a bit shallow to me. For me, that should be a steeper lip than what we've got there. But then you have a sort of a triangle that comes down, and then it's quite slim at the back is how I remember it, whereas that seems to be wrapping around. I'm not sure that that is right. The side profile, I've got to say, looks okay, if not slightly a little bit too upright, which would explain the lip being a bit short. I think it tucks in ever so slightly on the way up, and then this curve here I think should be not quite as gradual, and then it gives you an effect of a steeper lip. That's what I think on profile, but we'll check it and go through it properly in the next video. And then I think that is way too broad, going down from about halfway down to the bottom. I think is way too wide and should be a lot more pointy. So we'll have a look at that in the next video, and I'll do some research around that. Yeah, okay, so that is our hull. Yeah, actually it is a lovely hull, and most modelers will be very happy with it. So there you have it, the 1 to 200 scale super battleship Yamato. What are my first impressions? Well, I think the overarching first impression is what a lovely kit this is. There's lots to love about this kit, not just the fact that you've got a Yamato in 1/200 scale, but you've got a Yamato in 1/200 scale that's actually been done largely very, very well. So what are the highlights of the kit for me? Well, I think to start with, the level of detail that's been put in there, they've really utilised the slide moulding techniques to push as much detail in as they can. And when you look at things like the range finders and stuff, there is so much going into them that it's a very detailed piece of work. It's the same with the funnel, it's the same with the mast, so all the prominent parts really do look the part. I think the guns are well done. They've all got open ends. There's lots of detail being put into things like deck textures and that sort of stuff. So everything sort of feels right when it comes to those sort of things. Have they got the scale right in the main? Yes. Have they put every piece of detail in that they could? No, they haven't. But there is no such thing as a perfect kit. So other highlights for me, there's plenty of photo etch. They've put photo etch in for the track. They could have easily have done that in plastic, and quite frankly it wouldn't have looked quite so good. They've put all the railings in, so you've got everything in the kit that you need to build the model out of the box. Won't be a problem whatsoever for most people, I would suspect. Lowlights. Well, you know, I'm going to mention the fact that we've not got depth markers, because I always do when you haven't. It is a mistake not to put them in because all ships have them, but there you go. So that's a downside. There are one or two issues, like the front deck not having all the panels fully scribed on. It's a little bit odd. The nameplate that doesn't have a name on, it's a little bit odd. And I think there's one or two areas where they could have given you the parts and they haven't. So they haven't given us the boarding ladders, for example. Also, they haven't given us a rigging plan. So you're going to have to do your own research around that. And of course, the other low light is the paint instructions, which are neither thorough enough or accurate enough. Yeah, that's another low light. There's a couple of mistakes in here, a couple of errors. The random addition of a gun that shouldn't be there. We've got one or two minor issues with the shape of bits and pieces, and we've got one or two doors that are oversized and things like that. But in the main, it's nothing major, and for most people, they'll just be happy to build it. You will have, at the end of your build, if you built it straight out of the box without modification, something that looked like the Yamato. And after all, that's what we're trying to get to. I'm sure it will be a lot of fun to build. There is a lot of photo etch, some of it quite small, but if you've got experience of working with photo etch, there's nothing in there that's going to be massively daunting or overly complex. Now, I think before we go any further, we should talk about aftermarket. There is already aftermarket available for this. So gold medal models have a photo etch set for this. In the UK, it's around about £157, something like that. I have not looked at it yet, so I don't know what's in there. So I don't know how advantageous it is to get into that. I suspect that one or two other companies may well follow suit, because this is bound to be a big seller, and when it's a big seller, the aftermarket guys want a little bit of the action. It remains to be seen whether Pontos will do something with it, but if they do, you're not going to see anything for 18 months, 2 years, because they don't move quickly. They want to get the research right. And that will be a problem for them because there isn't much in the way of reference material for this ship, and we'll come back to that in a sec. So there you have it. Those are my thoughts. I think it's actually a lovely kit, and I actually think it's great value for money when you consider the cost of it compared to things like the Titanic and other 1-200 ship kits. I think it's great value. Now, when it comes to references, the best reference material you can get is the newly published Anatomy of the Ship, which focuses on both Yamato and her sister ship. And there's been recently a very nice review of that book by Nigel at Nigel's Modelling Bench. So if you have not seen that, you should go and have a look at that. Now, in the next video, in part 2, we'll be doing a rivet counters look at the hull and the deck to work out what should be modified and what should be changed to make this ultra accurate. And we will be using the anatomy of the ship as our reference because it is the most recent and most comprehensive single point of reference material available, which includes interviews with people that were actually on the Yamato at different stages in her career, information from Japanese archives, what can be found. A lot of it is with sub-suppliers, so for example it has the actual drawings of the rudder and information that's been collected since the wrecks were found. So we know a lot more about the Yamato than we ever did, but the Japanese, before they surrendered, did destroy much of the official archives on the design and build of these ships, which were built under immense secrecy. So there isn't a lot, and there certainly isn't a lot of photographic evidence of these ships. So with that in mind, hopefully I will see you in the next video where we will have a look at the hull in detail, the deck in detail, and talk around what we think needs to be sorted. I will be working with my friend naval architect Stephen Payne, who will also be going through this and critiquing it, and we will pull together something that we think will be of interest for those modelers that want to try and push the boundaries of this kit a little bit further. And then in the final third video we will do exactly the same and take a rivet counters view of all of the structures, the main structures and the guns, and included in that we'll have a look at the aircraft and the ship's boats. So I hope that was interesting. I know there's been a number of reviews of this already. What I wanted to do was take my time and do it properly, and I will see you on the next Yamato video, which will be coming out as soon as we have finished getting as many modifications listed as we can. Until then, take care everyone, you enjoy your modelling, and I will see you very soon.